What's up, everybody, and welcome in. We have heard the Albert name throughout the first 7 days of this trial. But today, we finally hear from some witnesses of the last name Albert. What will they testify to? Will we feel like there is more or less of a cover up after actually hearing from some of the Alberts who the defense has pointed the finger at is behind this big cover up and conspiracy? Let's find out as we react to and recap the testimony of two of the Alberts today. So we start out with Chris Albert, and we hear a lot about their background. And if we remember, I believe Chris Albert is the Albert brother that Officer Lank got involved in a fight outside a bar where charges were filed and not guilty verdicts were had, and more charges were filed that were dismissed, and federal lawsuits were filed. And I believe that is this Albert brother. So we know a little bit about him. We know he is involved in some of this stuff, but we don't really know how involved he was the night John O'Keefe died. So that's what I expect at least some of this to focus on, but also I expected to hear about some background, right? Who are the Alberts? How do they know John O'Keefe? How do they know Karen Reed? How do they know each other? The bars, the pizza shop, where is everything? Been in Canton forever. So I expected to hear a lot of that. And we know the Commonwealth is going to try to at least minimize some of it and talk about some of it. They're not going to leave all of it for the defense to get into. But before we get to Chris Albert real quick, I thought it was really interesting at the beginning of the day today. The judge said, has anybody, done any research or even inadvertently seen anything or have any issues that they need to talk to me about before the day? And a juror raised their hand. We obviously don't know what happened. There was a sidebar. I assume the juror told them what happened. I didn't notice her sending a juror out. And so how do judges and lawyers deal with something like this? Well, there's a couple ways. Number one, they could send the juror away immediately. Number two, they could say that juror is struck, but not send them away immediately and instead make them an alternate at the end and just send them on their way because they might not want any other juror to do a number of things. Meaning, number one, if a juror does see something, they're going to hide it because they think if I tell you, you're going to kick me out and I don't want to be kicked out of this jury. So maybe they'll be more open if they think, oh, well, if I tell the judge I saw something, they'll let me stay on the case, and it'll keep the jurors more open, even though the jurors and the lawyers know that that person has been struck from the case. They might not tell the juror. They may just tell the juror, okay, that's fine. Just don't talk to any other jurors about it. Stuff like that has happened on cases before. Or number three, it could have been no big deal. They could have handled it there and been like, thank you for telling us, go back down and sit and remain with the jury. So it could have been a nothing burger, much ado about nothing. So I don't know exactly what happened with that juror, but I do know that there was some discussion at the beginning of the day today. And I do know that there's a lot of publicity and press around this case. And it's not unfathomable that they could have inadvertently caught something on the news, on YouTube, on social media about this case. All right, so we found out some background about Chris Albert and the Albert family. He has 3 sons. The oldest one is in the Navy. We heard that 3, 4, 5, 6 times, which is great. And thank you for your service, Albert's son in the Navy. But it is not by accident that witnesses do things like that, because immediately it makes me like him more, right? I'm sure it makes a juror like him more as well. His son's in the Navy. That shines bright on your dad. But of course, that's usually strategic. He owns the D&E pizza shop, which is very close to the bars we've talked about in this case, and even also very close to his house. Not as close as it is to the bar as we methodically got through on cross. One brother's Boston PD, one's a Canton PD. John O'Keefe's Boston PD. He said that they were friends. He texted him that night. They may link up later. John O'Keefe was at McCarthy's, which is by Waterfall. He knew Higgins through his brothers. And his brother and Higgins were at a funeral earlier that day and came back because of the weather. A lot of people making decisions because we know by now there was weather. But then we get some very interesting testimony that, again, maybe you guys knew about. I didn't. I don't know about a lot of these facts until they come out. And he starts to testify about a cocktail glass and how it connects to the defendant and maybe John O'Keefe. I also think it's interesting that the prosecutor and Chris Albert like to refer to Karen Reed as the defendant. Sometimes when he's telling a story, he'll call her Karen or Miss Reed, but for the majority, he called her the defendant. Also something that's usually intentional. Let's take a listen to this exchange.
Come over to the area where you and your wife is. What, if anything, did you observe a defendant?
Well, when they came over, I think they started talking. At one point, when they first came over, the defendant came in with a glass underneath her jacket, and I thought that was kind of funny, and I laughed about it and made a comment about it.
And what, if anything, did you notice sort of about the glass? What was in the glass?
It was just a tall, like, cylinder glass with some clear liquid in it and a lime.
And that was under a coat when she came?
Yeah, it was like she pulled it out.
If you know about what time was it that Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed came in?
So I got there close to 10, I would say 10:45-ish, to the best of my recollection.
So we're going to get to the timeline here. And it's very important, not as much when they showed up, but when they left. He talks about Karen Reed wanting to go to the pizza shop. It's a tradition they did when kids would turn 21 in their family. But he said no because they were doing some weight loss challenge. But he bought fireball shots for everyone. And talking about the drinking is obviously important because of the element of the drinking and driving that we have in this case. And I think that as we go through, we're going to try to parse together how much everyone drank, especially Karen Reed, because it doesn't seem very clear. And he talks about fireball shots. I'm not even sure he said Karen Reed had a fireball shot. I think the prosecutor said John O'Keefe had a fireball shot. You guys can correct me if you heard specifically if he said Karen Reed drank a fireball shot. And people are still on the cucumber comment. Yes, he did confirm today that it was a lime in her drink, I believe. And then even there was asked if it was a lemon or a lime, but it was not a cucumber. Nobody else thought it was a cucumber except for me. I was wrong. I got the facts wrong. But he did buy fireball shots for everyone, although he said he didn't say everyone drank them. But then he gets into who left when. And this is when stuff starts to get important, especially when there's going to be multiple people kind of explaining how the end of the night happened. And that's when the mystery kind of starts.
Pretty much right before 12, it all started wrapping up.
And as far as the group that you were with at the high top table, who, if anyone, from that group left first?
So my wife left first, obviously. She didn't feel well. She left earlier. Then Brian and Brian left. My sister-in-law left. Matt and Jen left. I left probably second to last. I probably left last with John and Karen, or right around the time that John and Karen left.
And do you recall, as far as you're leaving around the same time, do you recall walking out together or seeing them outside, or where is it that you recall sort of leaving at the same time?
My best recollection is I walked out roughly the same time, and I walked out the building, and I come up Washington to the right, and they were either shortly after, shortly before me, and they walk up to the left.
And
so he basically walks out right at the same time as Karen Reed and John O'Keefe. That's the important part there.
Walk up Washington. Did you walk home that night?
Yeah, I walked home.
And when you came out of the bar, what, if anything, did you notice sort of about the weather or what was going on at that time?
Just started snowing. It was cold out, and it just started snowing. The ground had like a light coat.
Could you still sort of see the street?
Oh, yeah, you can still see it.
And you mentioned you walked out towards Washington, and Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed did as well?
Yes.
And which direction? Did you go in the same direction, different direction?
So when you come out the building, you have to go to the left in order to get onto Washington. So I come out to the left and then go to the right onto Washington, and they would go to the left onto Washington.
They were sort of walking
opposite directions.
On Washington.
Yes.
Now, as far as throughout sort of the course of the evening, did you have occasion to see sort of what Mr. O'Keefe you mentioned that he went to the bar? Was that the only beer that you saw him having, or did he have one?
I'm sure he had more than one. Yeah, I saw him with more than one.
So you saw him, but essentially what I'm asking is throughout the course of the evening when you saw him drinking, other than maybe the fireball shot, you saw him just drinking beer?
Just beer. Yeah.
And as far as Ms. Reed was concerned, what, if anything, did you observe her drinking?
Just a clear liquid in a glass. I assume it was some sort of vodka drink.
Was that the same glass that she had come into the establishment with under her coat, or was it a different glass later on?
I believe it was the same one.
So that's really interesting to me as well, right? So she comes in with the glass. Again, everybody's assuming it's vodka. That's fine. I don't think that's so big of a leap. But if she's drinking out of the same glass all night, and there was some talk of this later, are they like refilling the same glass? Is that what they do at a bar? You bring a glass from a different bar and they refill it. Maybe they didn't know it was from a different bar, as opposed to giving you another drink. I mean, I don't know, right? I don't frequently do stuff like this, so I don't really know. Maybe you guys can correct me, but that seems weird. It seems like maybe that would be an argument for the defense that she only had one drink or was refilling it herself with water or something like that. I don't know. It was just, that was kind of strange to me. And it was also important that he walked home. Terry said, "Hey, Peter from England, great coverage of this case." And yes, it's wild, as you guys say in the USA. Yes. Ashley makes a good point here. What do you make of this testimony with no pizza because of weight loss challenge and then ordering potato skins and chicken tendies? Makes no sense. Yeah. So it's funny when he said he ordered appetizers, I was thinking, okay, appetizers, whatever. Then later when he said he didn't go to the pizza shop, I just figured it was like, I can't pay for pizza for every time somebody has a birthday where they come to my restaurant. We just eat a bunch of pizzas, drink a bunch of beer that I have to pay for. You know, I can't do that every time. I think that would have been a normal response, but instead he said the weight loss thing and he didn't want to eat a bunch of pizza before getting a couple weeks before getting weighed in. And it's like, I mean, bro, 2 pieces of pizza is not going to change how much you weigh 2 weeks from now. Probably not. I don't know. I'm not a dietitian. I'm not giving any weight loss advice. But then when I heard, yeah, it was chicken tendies and potato skins, because before it immediately made me go back, like, what apps did you order? Because when I think apps, I think mozzarella sticks, maybe some calamari, you know, some chicken tendies, potato skins, sure. But I'm not thinking like a salad as an appetizer or something healthy as an appetizer. So that was very weird too. I don't know how picky the jury is going to be. And I don't know how important it is, like why they didn't go back to the restaurant. Again, if we're thinking some huge setup, I feel like I am very far away from some big scheme and plan to set it up to have him end up there to do this to John O'Keefe that night. If there is something that happened at 34 Fairview, I am more inclined to believe it was an accident on either party side, whether it was Karen Reed accidentally hitting him. I find nothing so far that would make me think she did anything on purpose, or if something happened with the Alberts and Higgins and whatever, it seems like as well, I don't see any animosity or anything going on. So if it did happen, maybe it was an accident that they tried to cover up. I don't know. I haven't seen anybody with negative intentions toward John O'Keefe at all through 8 days of trial. So I'm trying to, everybody admires this guy. So again, I don't know what's going on yet, but hopefully it's proven to us by the end of this trial, one way or the other. So then we start to get more into the timeline. And he says he left right after 12 o'clock, maybe 12:05, takes him 5 minutes to walk home, which would put him home about 12:10. He went immediately to sleep because he was freezing upstairs, take off his coat, whatever. A few minutes later, his son comes home. His son, whom he knew eventually ended up at Brian Albert, his brother's house, the Albert childhood home. And so he comes home about 10 minutes after, which would be about 12:20. Okay. That's basically his testimony. No big deal. Didn't think much of it until later, until cross and until his wife testifies. Then we get to cross-examination. Again, the lawyer confirms they've never met. A lot of ties to Canton, town selectmen, family there, cops in the family. And they discuss how Brian moved after John O'Keefe died. And I see Vicky say Albert's son involved cover-up making more sense. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to jump to quite that conclusion yet. I heard some people talking about this. I don't want to go there yet. I want to see what they actually can prove and what the evidence says. Why did he leave out deep fried pickles? Yeah, I mean, there's just so many good apps. So many good apps. So let's listen now to the exchange on cross about some of the connections with the city and how the Alberts are connected in Canton. We knew this was coming, right?
Can you rephrase that?
Lived in Canton, correct?
Correct.
You would agree with me that Brian Albert only moved from Canton after John O'Keefe was found dead on his front lawn, correct?
Can you rephrase that?
I'll phrase it the exact same way and ask for a yes or no if you can do that. You would agree with me that your brother Brian Albert only moved from Canton after John O'Keefe was found dead on his front lawn?
Objection.
Can you answer that?
Yeah, I just don't understand the phrase, but he moved shortly after that, yes.
Your brother Tim Albert lived with your parents in Canton, correct?
Correct.
And Tim Albert and your parents lived directly across the street from the Canton Police Department, correct?
Correct.
Do you know whom they bought that house from?
Objection.
The objection sustained.
But you still live in Canton.
That was weird, right? Who they bought that house from. And these questions, I will tell you what the defense did today for me. They really made me go, huh? Things that make you go, clips from today. There are so many objections. And it's objections to stuff that the jury is going to want to know. And it's objections that make it sound like they're trying to hide some connection with the Alberts. And then I can hear the judge respond a couple times, I'll sustain that objection with this witness, which leads me to believe that information is going to come in during or through another witness, which makes it even weirder that they're objecting now and trying to hide it now, knowing it's going to come out later. Now, obviously, we want evidence to come out appropriately only through the witness who should testify to it reliably. But there are so many objections where I was like, wait. I do want to hear that. And if we're talking about the connections, relevance is probably the objection. And I've got to guess in this case because we don't actually hear what it is. But I'm thinking it's relevance. And they're saying it's not relevant to this testimony. It's not relevant to what happened or outside the scope of his knowledge, things like that. But from my perspective, I'm like, whose house did they buy? And I'm starting to think, is it Kenny, the old police chief? I'm trying to fill the blanks with my head. And I'm wondering if the jury's doing the same thing. Did he buy from the proctor? Somebody said, I don't know. There's a bunch of sidebars we're going to have to skip through as well.
Correct.
With your wife, Julie Albert,
Correct.
and your son, Colin Albert, correct?
Along with my other two sons, yes.
And you would agree that your entire family has deep roots in the town of Canton.
I guess.
You would agree with me that the Albert family is well known in the town of Canton.
We have a big family.
And you would agree with me that the Albert family is a powerful family in the town of Canton.
Objection.
Sustained.
As a town selectman, you have some power, do you not?
I'm one of 5 selectmen.
And as a police detective, Kevin Albert has some power, does he not?
Objection.
So that's a yes, you're a selectman. He's like, I'm one of 5. It's like, so you're a selectman.
Sustained.
And you also have close friends on the Canton Police Department, do you not?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
I have some.
Now, you know that Massachusetts state,
So people saying that the sale of the house is public record, because it's public record doesn't mean it's relevant, right? And so that's why I'm thinking the objection's relevance. What relevance does it have? Who he bought the house for? Again, trying to prove connections. Maybe the judge thinks it's too far down the line. I don't know. I don't know the answer, and the jury doesn't know unless they go home and look it up, which they're not supposed to. So at this point, we're just going to leave it as an open question. Don't spoil it. Don't tell me who he bought it from if you know. Okay, so Brandy, what is a selectman? I didn't look this up. I'm just assuming it's like a councilman. In Clearwater, we have that too. I mean, they're not like a mayor even. They're definitely not like a governor. But they have some very interesting powers we're going to get to later.
police trooper Michael Proctor is the lead investigator on this case, correct?
I know that.
One of your wife's best friends is Michael Proctor's sister, Courtney Proctor, correct?
Objection.
Okay, that's sustained. You've got another witness. You can ask that up, Mr. Minute.
So she says stuff like that. That's sustained. You can ask another witness that. If it's relevant to ask another witness, by the way, he asks his wife next and she says yes. Why can he not ask this witness? I don't understand how that's not relevant or he can't answer if he knows. If he says, I don't know who my wife's friend is, fine. But if he does know the answer, why in the world would he not be able to just say yes to that? And again, that objection getting sustained looks to me like it's like Commonwealth trying to hide something there that we know we're going to hear later. And the answer is yes. So we know it's the answer they don't want. And again, I am probably nitpicking way more than the jury will over this and understanding objections and trial strategy a little bit more probably than your average juror. But from my perspective, I'm like, I would not object to that. You're highlighting it. It's still going to come out later. Just let him move on. The defense is going quick through these questions, even on normal speed.
You know Courtney Proctor, correct?
Objection.
Allowed.
Yes,
And you know her to be Michael Proctor's sister, correct?
that's correct.
You attended Michael Proctor's sister's wedding, correct?
Objection. Now, may we approach?
Sure. I'll let you call me.
So they're approaching here. Curious and Curiouser says, Peter, and what with the judge, I'll let you have that. I kind of like it. It's like, yeah, I'll let you have that one. No objection sustained. No, I'll let you have that one. I kind of like it. Some people don't. I get it. It's different. It's definitely different. Mackenzie said the glass they found in evidence, rock glass, is not the same glass O'Keefe had, tall cylinder glass. That seems like it would be important. So you said O'Keefe. I think they've said Karen Reed had the tall cylinder glass. It's hard for me to tell what kind of a glass John O'Keefe picked up when he walked out of the bar. Maybe we'll have more on that later. Number one. Number two, it would also make sense that maybe he picked up the tall cylinder glass that Karen Reed brought in because maybe he was going to return it to the other bar. I don't know. It seems like these people are all friendly with each other, friendly with the people that own the bars. I don't know is the point. I don't know. I don't feel confident about anything I'm giving you guesses to because that's all it really is. Zimmy said, why cover up an accident? I agree with you. That's one of my tough things to get over in this case too, just logically thinking. Terry, when Chris Albert more than once says, can you rephrase that? It's surely a stalling tactic while he thinks of the right answer. Especially when he said something like, I don't understand the phrase you used there. I was like, The phrase, your brother didn't sell the house until after John O'Keefe was found in the lawn? Like that, what phrase did you not understand there? And the defense attorney hits him a couple times when he tries to do something like this. Vicky said, if I were a juror, the way this guy answers cross questions would bother me. I get it. And I understand that. I do. I understand that. Paige, hey, Peter, can the Commonwealth reduce charges prior to the jury instruction like Nikolai Mew case? So they have already brought manslaughter charges, so a negligent homicide charge as well. So they've already got the lesser included here that I think is definitely more possible than second degree murder. I don't see how they get to second degree at all. Ms. Escobar, hey, Laura, fam, this case is crazy. I don't think at this point they have proved she did it. I think that we're still a long way away from that. So we'll see. We're going to keep our open mind here. I am going to skip through some of this sidebar that is literally minutes long. They're out there arguing about stuff. And sometimes it seems like they make their arguments and then they also say, okay, judge, can I ask this question? Can I go about it this way? And so that's why sometimes they take a little bit longer.
I believe you testified, sir, that you've known Michael Proctor's sister for about 20 years.
Objection.
I don't think he said that, but we'll let that stand and then move on, please.
About 20 years. You testified.
Sure, if that's
I believe, didn't you testify to that on direct examination just moments ago when Mr. Lally was asking you questions?
objection, Your Honor.
Next question, Mr. Unity, objection sustained.
How long have you known Michael Proctor for?
I mean, I know he's Courtney's sister, brother. I couldn't tell you exactly how long I've known him for.
About 15 years or so?
Roughly.
Who is Kenneth Berkowitz?
The former Canton police chief.
And how
Kenneth Berkowitz. Okay. He's going to start talking about this guy, the former police chief. And listen to how he talks about him. And I literally wrote down in my notes, oh, Kenny, excuse me, it's Kenny. And the defense attorney literally uses that against him later.
do you know him?
His son and my son, the same age. So they played on some sports teams when they were younger together. I think that's when I first came to know Ken.
You became friendly with him.
I became friendly with him, sure.
And how would you characterize your relationship with him?
Friends,
You've seen him socially.
really.
You've been out for drinks with him.
I think maybe once.
And you've known him for how long?
20 plus years.
And you say you've only been out with him for drinks one time in those 20 years?
I can't even remember if it was with drinks one time. Yeah, no.
What other types of activities have you done together?
I can't think of any. I think he came to an event that I held one time. That's about it.
Have you been out with him in a group setting?
That event that I just mentioned, yeah.
And what event was that?
It was my campaign event when I was running for select board.
He was one of your supporters.
He came by.
Did he donate money to your campaign?
I think he did.
He came by and he thinks, so he says he supported you. And he's like, well, he came by. Did he give money? I think he did. So then, yes, he supported you. Which again, is no big deal if you just say, yes, I got his endorsement. I got a lot of people's endorsement. There's 5 of us. I just started. I wasn't at the time that this happened. It is what it is. If you are a selectman or whatever they're called, it's like, I don't understand why you got to downplay it. It is what it is.
May we approach, Judge?
Yes,
So we're approaching again to see if we can go into the next
and we'll take that into evidence and then.
line of questioning he wants to get into.
That's what that depicts?
Yes.
What does it depict?
Me and Kenny Berkowitz.
And is that a
There it was.
fair and accurate representation
Me and Kenny Berkowitz.
of you and Kenny Berkowitz?
You mean is the picture us?
Yes.
Yes.
I would offer that one.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
55.
May that be published to the jury on the screen, Ron?
Sure.
So, Mr. Albert, that's obviously you on the right and Kenny Berkowitz on the left.
Correct.
Have you seen that photo before?
I believe I've seen it.
Do you recall when?
I believe that's my fundraiser for when I was running for the select board, the event that I spoke of earlier.
Okay. And when would it have been that you saw that photograph?
Clearly, the defense lawyer thinks the prosecutor showed it to him so that he wouldn't be surprised with it or say that they've never hung out together. That's what the defense thinks. But Chris gives all the right answers that you would want your witness to give if you're the Commonwealth.
Not sure. I don't know if it was on my Facebook page when I was running for select board. It looks familiar.
Has Mr. Lally shown you that photograph?
No.
Has he informed you that the defense would be introducing that photograph during this trial?
Nope.
You take the photo down, Mr. Bates. I'm gonna let them know. You would agree with me that one of your functions as a selectman is to oversee public safety in the town?
Yes.
And you would agree that the
One of his jobs is to oversee public safety in the county.
police department is a key component of public safety in the town?
Yes.
And you would agree that the police department is a key component of public safety in the town of Canton?
Yes.
So part of your duties as a town selectman is to oversee the Canton Police Department, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'll let him have it. Is that one of your duties, sir?
I believe so. I'm new at that. I'm recently elected, so I'm just going through it. But yeah, I believe so.
If one of your duties as the selectman is to oversee the Canton Police Department and they're accusing you of a cover up, I mean, very few people could really cover something up with the police department, but the guy that oversees it, I mean, like, this is why, okay, just FYI, knowing this evidence is coming, I couldn't care less if they're like, your wife's friends with Proctor's wife, right? It's like, yeah, just say yeah to that. No big deal. Grew up with them. Yeah. Kids play sports together. Yeah. I've got friends, man. Do you have friends? This is the stuff, though, like cops in there, Higgins in there, brother, friends, selectmen after the fact, your buddy Kenny. Those are bigger connections to me. The Lank story about what he did for you. It's interesting, really interesting.
And you became a town selectman shortly after Kenny Berkowitz retired, correct?
I'm not sure when Kenny retired.
But you would agree with me that Kenny Berkowitz has both personal and professional relationships with you and members of your family, correct?
Can you rephrase that?
You would agree with me that the former Canton police chief, Kenny Berkowitz, has both personal and professional relationships with you and members of your family?
Objection, Your Honor. It's the same question.
Go ahead and answer that question.
I'm not sure. I agree with that question.
Well, your brother Kevin Albert worked under Chief Berkowitz, correct?
Correct.
Would you consider that to be a professional relationship?
With them too, yes.
And your brother Brian Albert attended Chief Berkowitz's retirement party, did he not?
I have no idea.
But your brother Brian is also a friend of Kenny Berkowitz, is he not?
He may be. Not sure.
And as far as your ties to the Canton Police, you would agree with me that Lieutenant Michael Blank is a member of the Canton Police Department, correct?
He is.
And you've been friends with him for years, correct?
I've known him for a long time.
You've been childhood friends with him since the age of 12, correct?
Somewhere around there. Maybe earlier.
And you're tight with him.
I don't know if I call it tight.
He's not an enemy of yours, is he?
Oh, God, no.
No, he's a friend of yours, correct?
Sure.
And does sure mean yes?
Yes.
Now, your older brother, Brian, you've already testified, was a Boston police officer for years, correct?
Correct.
And he achieved some notoriety on a television show, did he not?
Objection.
Okay.
He was in the fugitive unit?
Correct.
And you know that your brother Brian was also a trained boxer, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Now, this is interesting, right? Definitely going with the theory. You guys have been hinting at it in the chat. I haven't kind of heard it yet, but boxers, big guys, able to beat somebody up.
Brian is a lot bigger guy than you are, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Your brother Brian Albert is someone who is close to his family, correct?
Yes.
And when I say his family, I'm talking about not just his wife and children, but also his extended family, correct?
Yes.
You were part of his family, obviously, correct?
Yes.
And your son Colin is part of his family, correct?
Yes.
The Albert family is close, correct?
Yes.
You all essentially grew up in Canton, correct?
Correct.
And you hung out with each other growing up, correct?
We were siblings, so
Of course.
yes.
And you still hang out with each other quite often, correct?
Like all of us,
In various combinations.
we have different relationships with my siblings.
Sure. But you see some more than others, but you hang out with your family, do you not?
Yeah, mostly during holidays,
And you go out for drinks together, correct?
occasionally,
And you're protective of each other, correct?
like most families.
And if someone had a dispute with a member of the Albert family, Brian wouldn't be happy about that.
Just yes to that. Just yes, yes, yes. We go out together. Yes, we're protective of each other. Yes, we love each other.
Correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
You know that Brian would stick up for your kids, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Your son Colin is particularly close to your brother Brian, is he not?
Objection.
I'll let him have that. Do you know?
Yes.
In fact, your son Colin was a football player through high school, was he not?
Yes.
What was his number?
In high school?
Yes.
34, I believe.
And was that for 34 Fairview?
I don't think so.
Was interesting, but again, I think that could be a reach by the defense. I'm sure everybody that just loves this defense theme thinks there's no way. Justine said, is this case a defense lawyer's dream? So it's interesting. So yes, there are a lot of aspects that give you a lot to work with as a defense lawyer, but I got to be honest, it's kind of a defense lawyer's nightmare, because if they really believe their client is innocent, it's always scarier going to trial. You have an innocent person sitting there. I'm not saying she is innocent. I believe they believe she's innocent. And so it can be scary. But as far as once you're in trial and you're doing it, yes, it is a dream, because you've got so much to work with. You've got so many connections. You've got so many things that have at least the appearance of impropriety. So I do think that this is one they're probably enjoying as far as working on their craft. Natalie, would there be less sidebars if they stated the reason for their objections? Potentially, probably, but some of the times if you want to actually have open argument, you're going to need to have a sidebar. Have you ever had a judge not want reasons for objections? No, I have not personally. Darcy said, no accident. WTF, you're not getting what happened. Watch the behavior. I mean, I got to be honest. I agree with you. I'm not getting what's happening right now. They have not proved what's happened on either side. Neither side has definitively proved what happened, which obviously is a strike against the state or the Commonwealth, not the defense. But the defense has not proved that these guys hated John O'Keefe and they clearly beat him up at 34 Fairview. There's no way that's been proven anywhere in this trial. Louvre said, loved seeing you on Canton Confidential, Peter. Thank you so much. Azam said, question 1. Peter, I remember asking about what, if any. Is there a better way to ask it? I mean, it's like, what, if anything, happened? You could just say, what happened? What, if anything, did they say? What did they say? Who, if anyone, was there? Who was there, right? You just kind of take out the if anything. Now, sometimes it can sound more like a leading question, but it's really not. It's asking the same thing. And question 2, how many grounds for objections are there? A lot. I keep guessing the grounds when I hear an objection. There's a ton. Way too many to just name here. And then Marty with just the absolute zinging zinger. The Commonwealth has proven SLED is not the worst investigators. Ouch. Ouch. Belinda said his whole face changed at the mention of his son. Well, we're going to get to that in a little bit. The defense lawyer did pick up on Kenny as well. We're going to skip ahead a little bit.
At some point, Michael Proctor came to question you, did he not?
Along with another trooper, correct.
And at the point in time when Michael Proctor came to question you, you knew who he was, correct?
Yes.
You knew him by face, correct?
Correct.
And you knew him by name, correct?
Correct.
There was no need for Michael Proctor to formally introduce himself to you, was there?
Objection.
What did he say when he first walked in the door in terms of introductions?
Objection.
Sustained.
Everybody seen this out there?
Sure.
I don't understand why you're objecting there. It doesn't matter. It's gonna come in. The jury's gonna get it. They know each other. But yet, another objection and sidebar. Although I think this is one, I can't remember. One of these ones, it definitely felt like the state or the Commonwealth won the objection, but I still think it's going to come out later.
To say, how do you do? I am Michael Proctor. Without getting into the precise wording, you'd agree with me that there was no need for Michael Proctor to formally introduce himself to you for that meeting, correct?
Yes.
He didn't need to say, how do you do? I am Michael Proctor, correct?
No.
No. Do you consider the Proctors to be the Albert second family?
Objection.
Do you consider that?
No.
You are aware that there are members of the Proctors family who have posted publicly that the
Objection,
Alberts are
Your
the second family, correct?
So the objection is sustained and I'm striking that question. Disregard.
Now, at the time that Trooper Michael Proctor showed up to question you, sir,
Really seems like the Commonwealth doesn't want to let them get into all these connections. But the problem is the judge has already allowed them to get into a lot of connections. So it's not like connections are off limits, just certain questions, which again, always is when you have to be careful to object. You don't want to let stuff that's inadmissible or bad or whatever that's not supposed to come in. But then there are other times where it can look like you're trying to block things or highlight things you don't want to. And I think we're borderlining on that now.
you knew that Karen Reed had been charged in this case, correct?
Yes.
And you knew that John O'Keefe had been found dead on your brother's lawn, correct?
Correct.
Did it occur to you that it was odd that the state police sent somebody from the Proctor family to interview you
Objection, Your Honor.
on February 10th of 2022?
Sustained.
All right. Now, you testified that on January 28th of 2022, that day, that Friday that you were working, John O'Keefe stopped into D&E Pizza, your shop, correct?
Correct.
And there was discussion about whether you would be going out that night, and if so, where you would be, correct?
Correct.
Now, you've previously, on direct examination, characterized your relationship with him as being friends, correct?
Correct.
It's fair to say, however, that prior to January 28th of 2022, you had never exchanged personal information with John O'Keefe, correct?
You mean, I'm sorry, you mean like phone numbers or what?
A cell number prior to that day.
No, I didn't.
And at that point in time, he had lived in your neighborhood for 4 to 5 years, correct?
Correct.
So I believe you testified that that night after working, you went out around 10 minutes to 10 p.m.
Roughly.
Before going out, did you have anything alcoholic to drink?
Think I may have had a beer at my pizza shop. I don't remember.
So that's very weird that he never had his phone number before then, but they were like buddies or friends. And he was like, you better come out here tonight or I'm going to screw up your lawn. Like, that's weird, right?
Exactly.
So you have a refrigerator there that you can keep drinks cold, correct?
Among other things.
And you do have beers in that fridge for
Sometimes.
personal use?
Sometimes.
Do you know how many beers that you would have had before going out?
No.
And would you have drank that beer as you were cleaning up at the end of the night?
Probably.
Did you have anything to eat at the pizza shop?
No.
When did you last eat before you went out at 9:50 or so?
When did I last eat?
Yes.
It's a long time ago. I'm not sure.
And you knew that your wife Julie was starting the night at CF McCarthy's, correct?
Yes.
And the appetizers?
I believe so.
All right, and that would have been the appetizers you would have gotten?
Probably like potato skins and some sort of chicken tenders. I would guess. It's 2 years ago, so I don't remember exactly.
There was the appetizer quote.
And did you order a drink along with the appetizers?
I believe so.
All right, and that would have been the Miller Lite that you talked about?
Correct.
Then not long after you got there, Brian Albert and Brian Higgins showed up, correct?
Correct.
And you had met Brian Higgins prior to that night.
Yes.
In fact, you had testified that you had seen him around quite a bit, correct?
A few times.
And you knew him, I believe your testimony was, from him working inside the Canton police station, correct?
I knew that he worked there.
Did you testify on direct examination, quote, I knew him from working inside Canton PD?
Yes.
And you've been inside Canton Police, correct?
Maybe twice in my life.
You knew that Brian Albert, your brother, and Brian Higgins were friends, correct?
I knew they knew each other.
So this is where the defense attorney gets a little snippy. He's like, Brian Albert and Brian Higgins are friends, right? Any of us could watch that video and know that they're friends. But he's like, they knew each other, which again, seems evasive for no reason. Just say, yes, they're friends.
So are you saying that they were acquaintances?
No, I guess they're friends.
You guess they're friends?
Yeah, they're friends.
Was there something confusing about my question the first time I asked it?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
In any case, would you agree that shortly before,
He's like, are they friends? Well, blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, yes, they're friends. It's like, did you get confused when I said, were they friends the first time? Objection sustained, probably argumentative, but it's a good point.
Brian Albert and Brian Higgins arrived at the waterfall, or shortly after they did, there was a couple whom, I believe you called them a Greek couple because their last name is difficult to pronounce for everybody. But
Don't you love that? You called them the Greek couple because their last name is hard to pronounce for everybody. Those Greeks.
do you remember them being there?
Yes.
All right. If I mention the name Kolakithis, does that ring a bell? Or do you-
That's them. Yeah.
That's them. Okay. And the whole group was either standing or sitting around a high top table.
Correct.
And at 9:45 p.m., you texted John O'Keefe while you were at the waterfall, correct?
Correct.
Would you agree with me that the language of your text was, quote, get over here or I'll fuck up your lawn, end quote?
That was one of the texts.
So again, they're going to get into text messages. That's what he said. He wanted him to come out. Same thing as the other ones calling the guy a wuss, whatever it may be. Marty makes a good point here. Lawn thing bothers me. It's just eerie. I agree. It's one of those things where it's just like, I get it. I don't think the defense should push too hard. It was very clearly a joke. There are other things that are going to come out as jokes that, I'm going to have a comment on the end of Cross about, can we not act like friends don't text friends each other that are jokes that maybe if somebody else read it, you'd be like, dang, that's what you said? Like, take it easy on your friend. Especially guys sometimes have relationships like that. And so I do get it, but it is weird in hindsight, knowing what happened. Michael said, why would the Alberts put a glass under John if they threw him out in the snow? What is the purpose? I agree. That's what I'm saying. I don't think anybody's proven anything at this point. There are things that don't make sense and both sides' arguments. Now, for the defense, that works because that ends up in a not guilty verdict. If I have no idea what happened and I don't feel like anybody connected enough dots to prove their story, I'm voting not guilty. I don't have to think the defense proved exactly what happened for them to win. Ellen asked, does it make it harder with no speaking objections for lawyers speaking to figure out what the objection is while questioning a witness? So yes and no. No, in the fact that you object, the judge is going to consider all relevant reasons for an objection. But yes, it makes it harder because anytime you limit what a lawyer can say or what they can do to argue, it makes our life and our job harder. And we hate it because we like to be in control. We like to fight and we like to protect the record. So yes and no. Hopefully that answered your question. Dougie Fresh. In closing, can the defendants use all the prosecution's objections and sustains to throw everyone under the bus and say the government is corrupt? No. They are not allowed to say they were trying to hide this. They're not allowed to say they want to keep this from you with their objections because that's improper, because those things were purportedly not allowed in for legal reasons because the judge found them to not be relevant or reliable or did not allow them to come in for some evidentiary issue, and you can't use that against the prosecution in closing. That would be improper. Now, you can say they didn't want to call this witness and we did, and they said all of this, and they didn't want you to know about these connections, so we had to ask all the questions about the connections, but you can't specifically bring up the objections as a way to throw shade at the Commonwealth. Is this where I was planning on stopping this? Yeah, I think so here. Okay. They ask him questions like, you would have no idea if it was water or vodka, but she didn't appear drunk to you. Answer was no, she didn't appear drunk to you. Then they play the video. And again, he says, here's the, I'm going to F up your lawn, get over here. Clearly a crying, laughing face, clearly a joke. So again, to say that that's, foreshadowing for any motive, I kind of have a problem with that. But this was interesting. So he testified, he left, right around noon or right around midnight, got home between 12:05 and 12:10. Well, as you can see at 12:14, that's when he exits the bar.
I think we need to back up. Let's start. If we could pause it for a second, please. Mr. Robert, you would agree with me, this was clearly the end of the night?
Sure.
The lights are all on at this point?
Yes.
The bar appears to have largely emptied out?
Yes.
Okay, continue, please. Pause it. Oh, there we go. My co-counsel is much better at this than I. Do you know who that person is who's leaving the bar at this point at 12:15 and 43 a.m.?
Christina, it might be better without that spotlight.
Okay.
See it now?
Yeah. I believe it's me.
Continue, please. Okay.
So instead of leaving at midnight, getting home at 12:05, 12:10, and being in bed and your son waking you up around 12:15, now everything's pushed back about 10 minutes. So you get home, get upstairs around 12:20, asleep by 12:35, but then your son woke you up 10 minutes after you got home or 10 minutes after you went to bed. So now the son woke him up somewhere between 12:30 and 12:45 potentially. So everything's being pushed back a little later, which I hear a lot of people saying this is going to implicate the son or something. I'm not so sure. It was a little bit strange though. And I don't know if this is going to be a big deal when the defense brings it up later, but I do want to also mention these pictures that I think come up here. Yeah. About, them being on John O'Keefe's front lawn and kind of messing with him about that. And then the story that comes out later with his son and other people, saying on Twitter, this is motive. I kind of think it's far from motive, but we're going to play it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to listen to it. A couple of similar questions. Clueless Cozy said, what's odd to me is joking with him like that, but they didn't even have his number until that day. I only joke like that with my closest friends. And then Mary Claire said, how are they texting without having shared phone numbers? So they got each other's phone number, I guess, that day, or he got John O'Keefe's that day. All up for interpretation. But what I'll say is that nothing in that makes me think this guy wants to hurt John O'Keefe. Okay. That's all I'll say. I don't know. Yes, it's weird. Sometimes people are weird. Sometimes guys, this is how we try to bond. Even girls too. Sometimes I don't mean to say, women don't do that, but, I can't explain that, but it definitely doesn't feel like motive to me, just to me. So let's hear him now talk about these pictures. It's also weird who's taking these pictures, who's sending these pictures to John O'Keefe. If this guy doesn't have his phone number, does his wife have the phone number? Were they sending him to Karen Reed? I have no idea. Again, unanswered questions that don't necessarily connect, but clearly they were messing with him about his lawn.
That first photo is that, well, first of all, whose house is that in the background?
That's John's.
And that is you on the right and your wife Julie on the left?
Correct.
By the way, I love tech in trials. And I hate when lawyers don't use it. They're using the brighten things up, the zoom in, the box in, the edit, the crop, all this stuff while you're asking witnesses questions. I love it. I love what they're doing with the tech.
Give the second photo, please. Okay. That is also John's house in the background there?
Correct.
And again, that's you on the right and Julie on the left, correct?
Correct.
We can take that photo down. Now, would you agree with me that those photos give some context to the text that you sent him on January 28th when you were trying to get him to come out and you threatened to, quote, fuck up his lawn if he didn't come out that night?
What do you mean give context to?
Well, in other words, here you are texting him photos of you and your wife on his lawn, correct?
Yes.
And that's a common theme that explains the January 28th text where you were threatening to fuck up his lawn, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
Okay. I just have one.
So again, and I know these are the kind of comments I'm going to get for saying this. Elaine said, Peter, do a deep dive and stop making excuses for this corruption. I'm not making any excuses, number one. Number two, the last thing I'm going to do is a deep dive. I want to look at this from the lens of what the jury is seeing, and the jury cannot and should not do a deep dive. This has to happen in court in front of the jury with relevant evidence. Now, everybody can say everything is corrupt as much as they want. I just want to look at what comes out in trial. But I will just tell you, I think the defense is stretching a little bit here. Clearly joking with John O'Keefe in that picture. Clearly something you do to your friend, not somebody you hate and want to beat up or think is going to beat up you or whatever it may be. Clearly laughing emojis in the text. Clearly his buddy because he wants him to come out with him. That's how it looks to me, based on what we've seen so far. Will there be more context? Maybe. And if there's more context, great. I reserve the right to change my mind and update as I get new information. But I'm not just going to read, all this other noise outside of what's happening in court and make my decision on that. I just think that I'll F up your lawn and pictures of them joking with him about being on his lawn is a real stretch to say that was foreshadowing for what they were going to do to him. That's just my opinion. Okay. Just my opinion. And he didn't remember who took the picture, which I thought was weird. Then we got to Nevercracker, which I thought was weird. And I wasn't really sure what angle they were going at with this. And I was a little nervous, to be honest, but it was just a character from a movie who's like the get off my lawn kind of guy. And then we heard a story that people on Twitter were swearing to me, this is proof. Wait a second. Did I miss this? Yeah, I think I skipped through this. This was before. Okay. That was proof of motive that John O'Keefe and the son wanted to hurt him. Okay. And I don't know the answer. So I don't know if it's true or not, but based on how this evidence came out on cross-examination, again, I did not feel like this felt like a huge motive for this guy to want to do something to Brian or to John O'Keefe. Just my opinion. Other jurors may disagree. You guys may disagree. That's perfectly fine. But let's listen to them talk about this exchange and maybe some beef that may have existed.
All right. And your wife, Julie, actually had John O'Keefe plugged into his contacts as Nevercracker, correct?
Correct.
In fact, you were there one time when Julie showed Karen Reed, her phone to show how John O'Keefe was plugged in as Nevercracker, correct?
I believe so.
And this whole nickname started because of a conflict that Colin Albert had with John O'Keefe.
Not correct.
John O'Keefe complained to you about things that Colin was doing.
Not correct.
He would tell you that Colin used to throw beer cans or beer bottles in his bushes, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
So you can answer that, or just-
That is not correct.
John O'Keefe told you that Colin used to flip him off, correct?
Not correct.
And say F you to him.
Never.
Colin used to cut through his yard.
Nope, that was Dylan.
You knew that John didn't like people cutting through his yard, correct?
No, I don't know that to be true.
So Colin, his son, whose timeline is kind of screwed up now at the end of the night, the defense is trying to put on that he used to do this stuff to bother John O'Keefe. John O'Keefe kind of hated Colin, I guess. Colin hated John O'Keefe. There was beef there, and that's the motive. I don't know. Again, I'm trying to read between the lines for what the defense is asking. It sounds like they're trying to set up some motive there. He says it was Dylan, and there's more to come now connecting the dots on this story, but you tell me, did this hit for you with the defense? Were you like, boom, locked, there's the motive, that's what I've been looking for the Albert family? Or no? Let me know what you think in the comments as we keep listening to his explanation.
Okay. So is it your testimony that John O'Keefe invited kids to cut through his lawn all the time?
I don't understand. Is that a question?
It was a question. I guess let me withdraw that and ask this. If John O'Keefe is Nevercracker, and he's the get off your lawn guy, are you denying that he doesn't like people cutting through his lawn?
Do you want me to, can I explain?
I just asked for an answer to my question. Mr. Lally will get up after I'm done, and I'm sure you can explain whatever you want.
So no, he's not no.
All right. Well, you would agree with me that there was a time when John O'Keefe was not home that you and your wife, Julie, went to his house.
That is correct.
And you entered onto his property, correct?
On his front property, yes.
And you had drinks in your hand.
Correct.
And you thought it would be funny to have a photo taken of you and your wife with drinks in your hand on his property, correct?
Correct.
And you knew it would be funny because you knew it would annoy him, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
Oh, you can go ahead. Can you answer that?
Yeah, he was actually asking us to watch his house while he was away.
Right, but that doesn't answer my question, which was he didn't ask you to go onto his property with drinks in your hand and take a photo, correct?
He asked us to watch his property.
Okay, but again, in answer to my question, the answer is no.
Was it Dylan? Dylan, was it you that did this? Gypsy Moon, this is a fantastic point. This is a fantastic point, and I'm glad you said this because it highlights what I'm saying and what I'm not saying, right? I am not saying there wasn't a fight. I am not saying there wasn't a brawl. I won't even mention to you what happened with some of my buddies in law school. The unthinkable happened after a night of drinking between two stupid guys that got mad at each other, and you just couldn't believe how it ended in arrests and people going to prison from law school. I mean, it's horrible. It's horrible. More acquaintances than friends, I should say. But friends with some of my very good friends. So I sound like the Alberts now, right? But what this would mean, Gypsy Moon, is that this wasn't the motive. You know, there wasn't some plan and scheme ahead of time that we're going to get John O'Keefe because of this. That's all I'm saying. I am not feeling or buying that this, running across his lawn or throwing a beer bottle. That's all I'm saying is they're not really pulling me in with this motive, but maybe some other people are. And that's why I'm asking, or that's exactly why I'm asking.
He did not ask us to go on his property and take pictures of ourselves with drinks in our hand, correct?
Yeah, he didn't ask me to send him a photo.
And you would agree with me that Nevercracker wouldn't like a photo of somebody on his lawn with drinks in their hands, correct?
The cartoon character, Nevercracker?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustain. Next question, please.
Yes.
It's probably speculation.
I have the photo.
Oh, one thing I did think was interesting is at the end, he said that Colin was at 34 Fairview, but he never mentioned that to Proctor when he was interviewed. Now that is a good point. That is an important point. And yeah, Lane, there's a lot of options, and Vicky, same thing. Why does there have to be motive? Something went wrong in cover up. Absolutely could be true. I don't know. Maxaw said, oh my gosh, give Peter a break. He's being meticulous and unbiased. Appreciate your coverage on this complex case. I knew this was coming with this case, Maxaw. I appreciate getting my back. Let's go. But I'm a never cracker for a different reason. I never crack. Oh, that was horrible. But I knew it was coming, so I get it. And I get people are very passionate, feel very strongly, especially if you feel like somebody's innocent and you want justice for the victim and you want justice for someone you think is innocent. I get it. This is why in every case, even when some people hate the criminal defendant, I try to give them the presumption of innocence when we go into a case. But I get it. I get that. Just hang with me here. Hang with me as we watch and listen to all this evidence and try to figure this out together. On redirect, he tries to establish that, there was a back and forth about, Brian selling the house after John was found in the yard and how they talked about it before January 28th, whatever. But then he gives some clarification to the whole Never Cracker and Dylan joke thing. And as I'm listening, again, there are going to be people that don't like this. This sounds plausible to me. This sounds plausible as an explanation to me about what happened.
Brother Brian Albert's house, and both he and Mr. Higgins were there, correct?
Correct.
As far as your interactions with both Brian Albert and Brian Higgins that following day, what, if any, injuries did you observe on them?
None.
Now, with regard to the Never Cracker, what was sort of the origination of that?
It's a joke. So my son Dylan, who is my littlest one, he was cutting across John's lawn one day, coming home from the school, walking. This was before John had a fence that went this way, like on Pleasant Street. So it was just cut off like a couple of minutes. He ran across John's lawn one day. This is my littlest son, who I don't even know at the time. He might have been like 9, 10. I'm not sure exactly how old he was. And John yelled something to him. Hey, kid, get off my lawn. So John was just making a joke. So Dylan got scared. He ran home and told my wife, Julie. And then Julie in turn called, called Jen maybe and said, hey, John just yelled at Dylan. And I think Jen reached out to John and John felt terrible. And John came down the street. John asked what kind of candy Dylan liked. And John brought Dylan a bag of candy and just said, hey, I was just kidding. It was just, so from that point on, we called him Mr. Never Cracker. And it was a joke between John. John thought it was funny. And
Right? No, and he's like, both stories don't make sense to me. So I'll just tell you, this is good for the defense if both stories don't make sense. But that's plausible to me that's how it happened. That's plausible, right? I mean, I could see his explanation being like that. Gurley said, I can't look at this as a juror because I've heard all the noise, but I agree with you that neither side has proven anything. Poked holes, yes. Proof, no. Thank you, Gurley. Girl, Rye. That's all I'm saying. If you know all this stuff, you wouldn't be a good juror. Doesn't mean you're wrong, right? Doesn't mean there's stuff that's not covered up or kept out of the case inappropriately, right? That doesn't mean that. I'm just saying we're looking at it a specific way, trying to look at it like the jurors, and I'm just telling you what I'm seeing here, okay? So for all of those of you that agree with me or disagree with me, one thing you all should be able to do is hit the like button on this video and subscribe to our channel so we can continue this discussion, continue trying to convince me, continuing telling me what you agree and disagree with me about. I love it. Okay, Julie Albert was up next, Chris's wife. Jen McCabe is, in fact, one of her closest friends. That's how she knew John O'Keefe. She doesn't know the Colo Keithus, but has seen him around. She saw Karen Reed sneak in the glass as well. Colin was at a friend's house, but did end up at 34 Fairview at some point. No issues or arguments between Karen Reed and John O'Keefe. They did ask to go back to the pizza place. Then what I thought was very interesting is her timeline was very, very similar, almost to a T, to Chris's incorrect timeline proven wrong by the video. So that's interesting. Not unusual, of course, that spouses would share stories and try to get them straight. She saw no injuries or issues with Colin, which honestly, that question, I wasn't reading Twitter or anything as I'm listening to this working today, but when that question came up, and I heard the Commonwealth ask her if Colin had any injuries, that's the first time I was like, wait a second, is Colin involved in this? The Bryans, I kind of expected, Albert and Higgins, and maybe some other people with the last name Albert. Sure, the McCabe's, maybe, I kind of had a feeling they might be involved in what the defense is trying to prove as a cover-up. Never did I think Colin was involved until the Commonwealth asked questions about his injuries. That was interesting to me. She woke up about 8-ish. Same time he says he woke up. And she always gets Brian Jr. donuts for his birthday. That's what she was planning on doing. Had missed calls from Jen McCabe. She goes over to the house between 8:30 and 9, talks to Brian Sr. and the McCabe's. By the way, they look fine. No, and Higgins was inside as well. No injuries, things like that, but they were sad. Something happened to John. Conditions inside the house were normal. I thought she did fine for the Commonwealth. Then on cross, it was interesting that, she said she talked to some troopers, but it wasn't until February 10th. So like 12, 13 days later, not just a couple days. One of them was Proctor, not close with Proctor, but confirmed, which is what he asked Chris Albert. Proctor's sister is one of her best friends. They watched, nieces and nephews, each other's kids, things like that. And then we get into some interesting conversation about telephone conversations with her close friend and the sister of the lead investigator doing the interviews, in this case with people sounds like he probably shouldn't have been doing the interviews for. So let's take a listen to this exchange on cross with Julie Albert.
Colin has been to the Proctor's pool,
Yes,
and you've seen Michael Proctor's mother and father at that pool, correct?
yes,
You've seen Courtney Proctor and her husband at that pool, correct?
yes.
You are very close with Courtney Proctor, correct?
How would you define very?
Well, I guess I'd ask you to define very close. Do you deny that you were very close with Courtney Proctor?
No.
Objection, Your Honor.
No, go ahead. Next question. You got your answer.
I didn't hear the answer.
Go ahead. Repeat that.
Do you deny that you were very close with Courtney Proctor?
No.
Okay. You talk regularly, correct?
Yes,
You text each other, correct?
yes.
You also talk by phone.
Very rarely.
Is it fair to? Did you say very rarely? You talk to
Phone.
Courtney Proctor by phone?
Usually it's text.
But do you stand by that?
So when you say very rarely or something like that, and then he asks you, do you stand by that? You should be worried as a witness in this case.
Rarely you talk to
Phone.
Courtney Proctor by phone?
Usually it's text.
But do you stand by that testimony that you talk to Courtney Proctor very rarely by phone?
Do we have a time frame? Do you mean now or do you mean then?
Oh, he's
Let me
got
ask
a
you
time
this.
frame.
Between February 1st of 2022 and September 6th,
Which is just 2 days after this happened. February 1st to September 6th.
of 2022, did you only speak rarely with Courtney Proctor?
I don't recall.
Were you using Courtney Proctor as an intermediary to communicate with Michael Proctor about this case?
Objection.
I'll allow it. No, I was not.
Are you aware?
So asked if she's talking to the sister, her best friend, whose brother is the lead investigator on this case. Did you guys ever talk about this case? I got to be honest, I know I shouldn't, but I think even I, who am like a lawyer and know how this stuff works and knows how we shouldn't be talking about stuff, it'd be really hard for me not to talk to my best friend about a case that directly involves me or my family. If their brother is the lead investigator, I would probably ask him. If he said I can't talk about it, it's a conflict, then of course I wouldn't push, but sheesh, that'd be tough.
That between February 1st of 2022 and September 6th of 2022, you and Courtney Proctor spoke by phone 67 times?
Objection.
Were you aware of that? No, I don't know the exact count.
Do you deny that you spoke 67 times?
I don't deny it, but I don't recall the exact amount of times.
Okay, so you don't deny that you spoke 67 times. You still want to maintain your testimony that you only talked very rarely with Courtney Proctor during that time period.
I just don't remember the exact amount of times.
Well, you know that my client, Karen Reed, was arrested in connection with this case on February 1st of 2022. Do you not?
I do.
You spoke to Courtney Proctor that date for 12 minutes by phone, correct?
I mean, just keep track of the days that things happen in this case and the days and amount of time she spent on the phone with Proctor's sister.
I don't recall exactly. I don't remember exactly.
Missy, especially when it's so obvious that they are. It's like the answer is yes. That's like somebody asking me, do you have long hair? And I'm like, well, define long. My wife's hair is longer than mine. It's like, sir, how would you characterize your hair? Below my ears, mid-length. It's like, no, dude, you have long hair. Come on. You have black hair. Well, I also have gray hair. It's like, dude, you have black hair. If somebody describes somebody with black hair, it could be you. It just makes you look worse. Where is somebody said, oh, Azam, what do you think of her chewing gum on the sand? Hated it, especially on 2x speed. Azam, it looks even more. So I'm glad other people picked that up. That's kind of funny. Tanya, shouldn't the Commonwealth at least try to bring out problems with the witnesses to get ahead of the damaging testimony the defendant is obviously going to bring up? Absolutely. Absolutely. There's good ways of doing it and there's bad ways of doing it, right? Cindy said, I had no information about this case beforehand, Norwegian law nerd. So I'm taking what I see from the live coverage, me so far in this trial, I'm confused. Agreed. And I think that that's a win for the defense at this point. I really do. Jen Mayer said, part 2, then Colin does something stupid because drunk. I may have missed part 1. Part 3, the dog then jumps in to be protective. I think I may have missed part 1, or maybe it was on the screen before. I get it. I totally get it that something accidental could have happened, or boys being boys if they're drunk at the house and wrestling just like they were doing in the bar, which they showed, which again, I get it. She almost swallowed her gum at one point, Belinda said. But yes, I think a lot of things could have happened, but the state's got to prove it. State's got to prove what actually happened, and they have to exclude all reasonable doubt. So we'll see if they're able to do that.
May I approach?
Sure.
Before I approach, your memory is exhausted as to whether you spoke to Courtney Proctor that day, and if so, how long the two of you spoke?
Yes.
I mean,
Sure.
I'm showing you a document with a number of.
Just show it to
Right.
us.
No, I just wanted to point out which one that I'm pointing out. So the third, I was going to say a number of lines. The third line down, if you would take a look at that specific date and time and see if that refreshes your memory about whether and how.
So this was my favorite part of defense lawyering of the day. If any of you remember, go ahead and throw it in the chat. But this to me was a boss move. This in my research and talking to jurors afterwards and, talking to a lot of you, this is high level lawyering. This is comfortable lawyering. This is confident lawyering. I always look for moments and ways to do this in a trial if I can. Sometimes the moment presents itself, sometimes it doesn't. But when it does and you react like this and it works like this, it's just glorious. It's so good. It's so good. Let's see what he does.
How long you spoke to Courtney Proctor on February 1st, 2022.
Can you see that, or do you need glasses?
No, I can see it.
I do have a pair of readers that I need as well if you need to borrow them.
Yes, if I could.
Of course.
Thank you. I left mine downstairs.
I just got these and it's like.
Mr. Yannetti, just bring them up, please.
It took me a while to.
And you see the judge kind of picked up what was happening. She's like, please don't be so likable, sir. Please don't be so charming. Just give her the glasses. I'm going to back it up just so we can watch it again because it's great. It's great lawyering. Give me my moment here. It's great lawyering. And the judge sees it. The jury's probably smiling. They probably love it. What a nice guy. And it really shows that as defense lawyers, you're about to tear this witness up. You're fighting for your client. You're not letting her get away with anything. But you're a nice guy. It's not personal. It's your job. And you're trying to get to the truth. Of course you wanted to read it. Here, take my glasses, ma'am. And I thought she did not look like a adverse witness that hates this guy because someone would be like, no, I don't want your glasses. So she was fine with it too.
No, I can see it.
She's like,
I do have a pair of
I can see it. No problem.
readers that I need as well if you need to borrow them.
Yes, if I could.
Of course.
Thank you. I left mine downstairs.
I just got these and it's like.
Mr. Yannetti, just bring them up, please.
It took me a while to figure them out, but anyway.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And the smirk to the jury there.
It's like.
Mr. Yannetti, just bring them up,
Get it on
please.
the screen.
It took me a while to figure them out, but anyway.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I mean, look at it. Oh, you can't see it because I'm in the way. I mean, look at that smile. That could be what's the meme where it's like the mic drop or like all his friends are like, oh, I mean, that's great. Good job by you, Mr. Yannetti. Good job by you.
It's the third line.
Third
down.
line down. Yes, I see it. I don't recall this.
Okay.
It's a long time ago. Thank you.
And you say that having seen this record, it does not refresh your memory that you spoke to Courtney Proctor for.
Don't. It does not refresh your memory. That's what you have to do.
Did Did Courtney Proctor tell you the day of my client's arrest on February 1st that she had been discussing the case with her brother that day?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you speak to Courtney Proctor that day in any fashion?
What day exactly?
The day of my client's arrest on February 1st of 2022.
That was on the sheet you just gave me?
It was.
Well, I did, obviously, if it was on that sheet.
Okay. And when you talked to her, did she tell you that she had discussed the case with her brother?
Objection.
Sustained.
Were you notified that Karen was going to be arrested?
Objection.
Sustained.
What did you discuss?
I don't recall.
So there's a couple plausible things here. She's calling her best friend when big moments are happening. Is she using her as an intermediary? That would be bad, obviously. Keeping them posted in this, cover up that the defense is trying to prove. The timing of it looks very good for defense. I have cases sometimes where the timing just looks too coincidental, even if people don't remember exactly what happened. And you have emails or you have a calendar and you can say, oh, like I've done some employment discrimination cases where it's like, oh, right when my client got pregnant, all of a sudden you didn't have enough hours and you had to cut her hours. It's like, well, oh, you say it has nothing to do with her getting pregnant, but it's like, really, really, sir? Well, then why the very next day did you start cutting back her hours? And then right before she had the baby, you fired her altogether. Is it because you didn't want to have to hire somebody else while you give her maternity leave that was due to her in her contract? So it's like you can use this stuff that may look like coincidence. But on the other hand, I can also see from her perspective, it's her best friend and you're talking to her all the time. You don't always remember what you talked about, although you did say you very rarely talk to her on the phone. Kay said, I think Brian Higgins went to the police station at 1:30 to see if any calls had come in about the fight. John is already dead, dying. I mean, he went and then came back and was there that morning. There's definitely some shady stuff with his timeline. I want to see how it all connects. B&B, I love your lives. Thank you. More and more, I think not guilty, total cover up. And I think Colin was involved in some way. This family seems sus. Izzy said, both Chris and his wife know something and try to distance themselves. I am no detective, but something ain't right. Connections, connections, connections. So I do think with these two Alberts specifically, we've been waiting to hear from the Alberts, but these two seem to have the least connection, right? They went home. Actually, I'm sure there are Alberts with less of a connection, but I think we need to hear from the McCabe's and Brian Albert and his wife. And maybe Colin. I don't know. Is he going to be a witness? Who drops off donuts to a cold car versus a warm house? I thought that was a little strange too. She's like, I didn't want to go in to the house, but they basically forced me in the house. Ned Nederlander. Lank and Good said they went back for a second interview at 9. Julie said she got there 8:30, stayed 30, 45 minutes, but no police mentioned her being there. Yeah, it's all kind of vague with the about 30 minutes. I got there at 8:30, 8:45, 9 o'clock. He went to bed at 12:10, 12:15. People don't have, they're not looking at their stopwatch saying, okay, it is exactly 9 o'clock here. And that's when I got here. So I get that. I get that. LJ Peach said the parsing of answers is what makes me look at them trying to hide something. That I agree. Just say yes. Don't object, dude. Yes, she's my best friend. She's my best friend. It's like big deal. She's my best friend. So what? That means that we had this cover up and hurt our friend? Come on, dude. No, I don't know what I was talking to her about for 30 minutes. She's my best friend. We talk all the time. No, I wasn't asking her about the case. I was asking her about her son. Whatever. Missed call from her boyfriend or best friend at 5:50. Doesn't call her back. Sees the car at the Alberts at 8 a.m. and doesn't immediately panic. Sus. There's definitely some weird things that don't connect here. No doubt about that. There are some things that don't connect. Yes, 67 times to rarely seems like perjury. Again, the problem with perjury is very difficult. And when you say things like not that often or rarely, everybody's definition of rarely is a little bit different. If she said, I never spoke to her on the phone, lock it in, and then you can prove 67 times, fine, then maybe. But using those other qualifiers sometimes makes perjury pretty difficult. 67 over 6 months isn't that much. Look at Maria. Hold my beer. She's like 10 times a month is no big deal. 10 times a month. I don't talk to anybody on the phone 10 times a month. I really don't think I do. Not my wife. Definitely not my wife. 50 bajillion text messages? Yes. But 10 phone calls a month? I really don't think so. Maybe it is. Maybe it is 10 times a month. But that's it. That's the only person that would come anywhere near 10 times a month might be my wife. Janice said, Chris Albert was acquitted of vehicular manslaughter in 94. His lawyer was the brother of this judge. Netflix could not write a series this good. In my opinion, Colin is entangled in this crime. So I have heard this a couple times. Gosh, that seems surprising to me that this judge would stay on the case. I don't know if they tried to recuse her or get her bumped from the case and she said no. I don't know if they already asked a higher court about this. I don't know the answer. Demure had said the same thing. If the judge's brother, John Prescott Jr., defended Chris more than once, including the fatal MVA hit and run 95, served only 6 months of a 2-year sentence, shouldn't the judge have recused herself? I mean, I would, but is it an automatic recusal? Maybe not, because Chris Albert is not a party in this case, right? So, I mean, you can't just say because Chris Albert was the friend of a victim and even the friend of the defendant, maybe that you should recuse yourself. Knowing the entanglement and what the argument of the defense was going to be, you can't just let the defense say, I'm going to point the finger at somebody that somebody in your family knows to get a judge recused. Maybe that's, too many degrees of separation. I don't know.
The next day, February 2nd of 2022, was the day that my client was arraigned back in Stoughton District Court. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
You spoke to Courtney Proctor 3 times that day before my client's publicly televised arraignment at 9 a.m. Did you not?
Again, I don't remember.
After the arraignment, you spoke to her again for 27 minutes, beginning at 10:58 a.m. Did you not?
I don't recall.
Okay. So your testimony is, well, we strike that. My client's arrest was pretty big news in Massachusetts, wasn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
You were aware that my client had been arrested, correct?
Yes, I had seen it on the news.
You were aware that she was being arraigned the very next day, were you not?
Yes.
This case involved your family, did it not?
How do you mean it?
Well, you knew that John O'Keefe was found dead on your brother-in-law, Brian Albert's lawn, correct?
Correct.
So necessarily your family was involved in this case, correct?
Somewhat, yes.
And
So what's interesting is now that we're talking about the judge's recusal and you guys are all telling me they tried and she said no, not a surprise to me, but interesting. But even the Alberts agree that they're involved in this case. So if her reasoning was they're not parties, they're not involved in this case, I think it's questionable. I think it's questionable at least.
you knew that ultimately you'd probably be talked to by investigators from this case, correct?
I assume so, yes.
Didn't happen.
So, I mean, everybody kind of knew they were going to be at least witnesses or part of this case. Sheba B. Number 1, stay off yards. Number 2, take off your shoes before going into homes. Number 3, go into the Albert's home, take off my shoes, come out of Albert's home, 1 shoe, and on the yard. Ooh, I like that connection that like everybody had to take off their shoes when they go in the house. And maybe they could only find 1 to put back on. I don't know. It doesn't make sense either. Why, if it's a setup, why is there only 1 shoe? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't feel confident about anything in this case, except for shoddy police investigations and people that were working on it that absolutely should not have been working on it. I do feel confident about that. Izzy, the way she looked at the prosecutor after one of the questions, expecting an objection, screaming. Also, why would she not want to go in the house? Great question. I don't know. But she definitely said she did not want to go in the house. And he was like, no, come in the house. And so she did. And this is after she had already been in the house and knew, kind of what happened. Belinda said, I speak to my sisters 2-3 times a day on the phone. Yeah, and I know my wife talks to her mom literally every single day. I know my sisters talk to my mom literally every single day. So I know I'm not saying it's normal for everybody. And that's the other thing. It's rare is different for everybody. V. Louise said, she said, no, Peter. Also rents to other witnesses. Like rents a house to them? I would believe just about any connection at this point, if I'm being honest. Vicky said, how can this judge oversee the trial when her brother represented an Albert? I mean, they're not parties technically, so I get maybe where she was coming from legally speaking. Izzy said the way she looked at the and she rents the house to them. Yeah, interesting.
For 13 days, but ultimately they did come, correct?
Yes.
So this case had to have been pretty big news within the Albert family, was it not?
Yes.
You were discussing it with your husband, correct?
Yes.
You were discussing it with your other relatives, correct?
Yes.
You were discussing it with your friends, correct?
I don't know about my friends, but
Okay.
Yeah.
So is it your testimony that with all of this going on, you confined your discussions about this case just to your specific family members?
not necessarily.
No, I mean, clearly, you would have talked to Courtney Proctor about it, correct?
Objection.
He's making good points. I would have said, I tried to talk. I mean, if it's true, obviously, I would have said, I tried to talk to her. She told me she couldn't because it's her brother's work. So we never talked about it. That would make more sense. Caitlin said, I went into this case blind, not sold on a cover up yet. Chat knows way more than me, LOL. But the evasiveness has me very curious. Same. Alicia, what happens if KR is not guilty? Does the case get tried again? They could charge somebody else and try it if they wanted to. It's always harder to try somebody else because it's usually reasonable doubt that you thought and had probable cause and arrested and thought you could prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Karen Reed did it. That would be the first thing that anybody would point their finger at would be Karen Reed. Jason Lizat. Peter, why the mini spine? I was just thinking about that when I put it up there. People are going to ask. So, doctors send stuff to our office all the time, and this is just something that they sent to our office. I'm not going to show you. This is exactly where John O'Keefe must have hit the car. So I'm going to use this to show you guys. No. All right. So we're almost done here. And what's really interesting is how the judge literally cuts off David Yannetti in the middle of cross when he's starting to get on a roll. Pretty wild.
So, folks, why don't we end here? Right,
That was it. Hold on. Let's see where he
Yes.
was. He was on a
Discussing
roll
it
and she
with your
cuts him
friends,
off.
correct?
I don't know about my friends, but
So is it your testimony that with all of this going on, you confined your discussions about this case just to your specific family members?
not necessarily.
No, I mean, clearly, you would have talked to Courtney Proctor about it, correct?
Objection.
So, folks, why don't we end here? Right,
She literally cuts it off in the middle with a sustained objection. That's wild. That's so wild. So I see a bunch of new people in the chat. Let me know if you're new from this case. I always love to see new faces and names come in here, add to the conversation. I love a diverse conversation. People agree, disagree, always cool. And if you guys are new, I am Peter Tragos, lawyer real lawyer, Tampa, Florida, trial lawyer, practice mostly personal injury and wrongful death, car accidents, truck accidents, things like that. Also criminal defense. My dad's huge criminal defense attorney, and we practice that in our firm as well here in Florida and around the country as well. Love watching trials, catching up with them, answering your questions, talking to you guys about this. So I'm pumped you guys are all here. I would appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Of course, I'm going to hit a few more questions on the way out. But if you're taking off now, I appreciate you joining us. Crime Nurse said, I would like to express my absolute disgust for Judge Mark Newman giving Adam Montgomery custody of Precious Harmony. Just watched sentencing. Oof, I know that case was brutal. Elaine, there's an ongoing federal investigation into this DA's office, and defense and Commonwealth received info that they could not in good conscience allow this case to go forward or go to trial, and that Karen Reed was not hit by a car. Facts. Well, except that they did go to trial. I agree that there is a federal investigation, major issues. I think it absolutely helped the defense, and they got information they wouldn't have otherwise gotten, but not enough, obviously, to stop the case from going to trial because we're at trial. Vicky, judge's involvement with Albert's good grounds for appeal if necessary. I think they'd probably need more than that. I think it might be an appellate issue. Is it an automatic win? I would say probably not, but it's an issue for sure. Something I'd be frustrated with. June, if you were the investigator, would you check where he got that glass, his movements, whether she did it alone? If you found a piece of glass together with her broken tail light? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And if I was the Commonwealth and that was a big piece of evidence, I'd be focusing on it with these witnesses. Vince, I'm curious when and to whom they sold the house. So I don't know if I put that. I swear I got a super chat that said they swapped houses with the Albert parents. I don't know if I put that up on the screen or not. And I don't know if it's true. So we got to kind of see. I'm not sold on the cover up just yet, but this lady's testimony is the first thing that has moved the needle for me the whole time. That's interesting. Tell me why, Greg, in the chat. Michelle, hey, Peter, do we know the nature of the FBI investigation or what prompted it? If it's relevant to this case, why did they move forward with this trial before the feds are finished? I don't know the answer. It's up to the judge, judicial discretion. The judge is totally biased toward the prosecution, Lisa said. And Ellen said, I hope that all the peeps that claim Brian Koberg, yes, I saw you post this before, that think he was set up in Idaho, watch this trial to get the perspective. Karen Reed is set up, Brian Koberger is not. So Ellen thinks there is a lot more evidence of a cover-up here than she thinks is going to come out Brian Koberger. I'm going to remain open to both. I want to see what happens at trial. I want to see what gets presented to the jury as always. Woo! This was a longer one. I didn't expect it to be longer on a short day of court, but you guys had some great questions. I have appreciated so much. Mary Jones said, I have been a member for months, but I've never spoken. This is beyond ridiculous. How can the judge get away with being so obviously biased? I appreciate you guys so much, honestly. This is an interesting case. It's a really wild one. I hope you guys will stick around and come around for future lives. Oh, more are coming in. I'll hit a couple more, then I got to run. Mary Lou, how did he text the lawn fence pick, but never had his phone number? He said he didn't know who took it. So I don't know. See yous later with a Boston accent from John. Chris, I went into this not leaning either side, but this seems like a town of good old boys. Doesn't surprise me if they banded together to frame Karen Reed. And Belinda wants to hear from Papa Tragos. We might get him on at some point. He's not really watching the trial, so it's hard to get his involvement really here. Okay, that's all I got. We will keep following this case, of course. We're doing daily recaps. Make sure you guys check out the other videos if you haven't already. Hit the like button, subscribe. You're the best. I'm out of here. Till next time. See you later. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a pase you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, the Lawyer You Know.